And welcome back to Capital Talk. We're talking issues all this week, and we're choosing the environment today because a lot of people don't really discuss or think or talk about it, but we need to because it's ours. It's the only one we have. We destroy it, might as well just pack it all in because we're destroying our entire civilization. And on the bench today is a man who's been doing research for quite a while, and he's gotten results. That's right, all the way from China in 1995, the Loess Plateau. Did his research. The place was turned around in less than a decade. Same thing in Ethiopia, Rwanda, Kenya maybe can turn around. The Mao, can we turn that place around? Let's talk to Professor John Liu. So Professor, people have said that the Mao, research says, a quarter of the Mao forest, this huge water catchment area, one of the most important in the region, quarter of it has been destroyed. 100,000 acres or hectares. That's huge. But compared to the Loess Plateau, it's not that big. I mean, if people are knowledgeable enough, if people are sensitive enough, they can turn it around.
Well, I haven't been to the Mao, so I would like to do that and go take a look. And there are certain differences in Africa that you have to consider from places like the Loess Plateau. Your latitudes here, you're very close to the equator. This is both good and not so good. So you have very high levels of solar radiation. You can generate biomass very, very rapidly. But your soils at the lower altitudes release carbon much, much faster. There's a different type of breakdown. But essentially, the principles for everywhere are the same on Earth. Biological life must cover everything. If you see exposed soils anywhere, if you see rivers which are highly silted and running brown, or running seasonally and then drying up in the dry season, you have lost functionality. You need to calculate what's the rainfall. So are the rainfall in these areas 400 millimeters or 700 millimeters or 1,000 millimeters or 1,500 millimeters? What's the rainfall? That's first. And then to what's exciting and interesting about this restoration is that we've seen sometimes scientists are measuring and they find that the evaporation rates are very high in certain places. And they say, oh, well, you know, this place is ruined. It has this kind of an evaporation rate. If we look at that number and wonder, why is the evaporation rate so high? Does the evaporation rate, must it be that high? The answer is no. It's a measure of dysfunction. It's because the natural functionality in many of these places has been lost. And so there isn't a vegetation cover, there isn't a deep penetration of organic matter, there isn't constant infiltration and retention of rainfall into the soils and into the biomass, and so all the water evaporates off. And when you revegetate these areas, suddenly all the water remains in the system.
Speaking of revegetation, Professor, you were talking about planting indigenous, let's say, trees in a place where there were none or where they had been cut out. Now, due to economics or whatever, or lack of knowledge, people plant trees, say, that are not indigenous. Like, let's say, eucalyptus in a place where they had other kinds of trees, and eucalyptus isn't necessarily good for the soils, correct?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's correct just to vilify any species. I think you just have to look at it scientifically. There's not, my opinion about one species or another is not really relevant. The facts are what's important. So you have certain trends. These trends are the trend toward total colonization of the planet by biological life. Another trend is the trend toward differentiation and speciation and biodiversity. These are powerful trends. The other trend that I look at is the accumulation of organic matter over time as each generation of life lays down its body. These three trends are long-term evolutionary trends which begin from the beginning of evolutionary time. So if human beings come and they say, well, we don't understand this biodiversity.
Yeah.
Let's just have this species or that species. Well, that's an interruption of a long-term evolutionary trend. Human beings have only had settled agriculture for around 10,000 years, and we've made huge damage. Possibly we began reducing biodiversity maybe as early as 40,000 years ago. But we're talking about billions of years and hundreds of millions of years of evolution bringing us this climax equilibrium in which we benefit, we live. And so if we start to change that, now what's the result when we have started to reduce biodiversity? What's the result if we've reduced the biomass or the accumulation of organic matter? Deserts, extinctions, flooding, drought, famine, so the loss of river systems. So we start to see these are the reasons why things are happening to us. It's not magical.
Yeah.
It's that we've disrupted long-term evolutionary trends, which you cannot do without suffering the consequences. So we have to understand them. Now, in terms of species, biodiversity has many functions. It's not simply that we need biomass, that we need vegetation cover. We need vegetation cover that allows nature to have many different varieties. We don't know what those varieties necessarily are for. They may provide the drug that cures HIV infection or something. So if we cut it all down because we don't know what it is, we think it's not valuable because we don't understand it, that's not the right perspective.
Yeah.
Now, what the Chinese did that I think could be useful in understanding this is that they divided the land between ecological land and economic land. And they found that by doing that, they allowed nature to return to the ecological land, and they had improved productivity in the agricultural land. So one of the findings, which is also counterintuitive, but which is very interesting, is that in highly degraded lands, you can reduce the area in cultivation and increase productivity. So if you're extensively using land for agriculture, but you're getting very poor yields because you've lost water and you've lost soil fertility, you can increase productivity by reducing the area and returning the other area to nature. So that might be, although I haven't been to the Mao, that might be something that would be useful for an area like that, which has been transformed from ecological uses to economic uses with disastrous results.